The church smelled faintly of lilies and polished wood, though the air was thick with unease. The room wasn't large, but every seat was filled. Rows of faces stared toward the altar where Lena stood, radiant in white satin. At 29, she was beautiful in a quiet, fragile way, soft curls pinned neatly, her eyes sparkling more from nerves than joy. She smiled as the organ played, though the corners of her lips trembled. Beside her, towering and unmissable, stood Derek. He was 42, and his sheer presence commanded the room. At over 500 pounds, his frame dwarfed everyone around him. Sweat glistened on his forehead under the heavy lights, but his eyes never left Lena. There was devotion in his stare, yes, but something more, an intensity, a hunger, that unsettled even those who barely knew him. The priest's words echoed gently. "Do you, Lena Grace Whitman, take Derek Harold Miles to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Her voice, barely audible, answered, "I do." Guests leaned forward, catching the slight hitch in her tone. A cousin whispered, "She doesn't look ready," and was silenced by a sharp glance from Marissa, Lena's younger sister. Marissa's eyes darted from her sister's face to Derek's looming figure. Something about his grip on Lena's hand, too tight, possessive, made her stomach knot. "And do you, Derek, take Lena?" "I do," Derek boomed, before the priest even finished the sentence. His voice carried a finality that swallowed the room. His thick fingers tightened around hers until she shifted uncomfortably. Yet she did not pull away. The kiss followed. It was brief, almost awkward, but Derek lingered longer than she intended, his hands clamping on her shoulders, pulling her into the embrace. Applause scattered unevenly across the church, more polite than celebratory. From the pews, whispers carried like drafts. "She barely knows him." "It's too. Oh, fast. He looks dangerous." But the couple walked down the aisle as husband and wife, the cameras flashing, smiles plastered across their faces. The reception was held in a modest hall attached to the church. White tablecloths, cheap wine, and a 3-tiered cake tried to mask the tension. Lena laughed when prompted, posed for photographs and accepted hugs. But behind every smile, her eyes betrayed exhaustion. At one table, Marissa leaned close to a family friend. "She doesn't love him. She can't. Look at her hands. They're shaking." The friend replied, "Maybe she just wants security. He's stable, older. She's had a rough couple of years." Marissa wasn't convinced. Every time Derek moved, she noticed the way Lena stiffened. When he fed her a forkful of cake, pressing it insistently to her lips, she forced a laugh that sounded rehearsed. Later, Derek rose to make a toast. His voice boomed across the hall. "To my wife, the woman who saved me, who saw past everything others judged, my size, my flaws, my scars, and chose me. She is mine, and I am hers, forever." His words, meant to be tender, carried a sharp edge. "She is mine." The phrase lingered in the air, darker than he realized. Glasses clinked hesitantly. Lena lowered her gaze, swallowing hard, cheeks flushed not with love, but discomfort. When the music began and couples filled the dance floor, Lena danced slowly with Derek. His arms engulfed her, his breath heavy in her ear. "You'll never regret this, Lena," he whispered. "I promise." She smiled faintly, nodding, but her eyes drifted toward the exit. Just for a second. The night ended with cheers and waves as the couple slipped into a waiting car. Derek lifted her hand and kissed it, eyes gleaming with triumph. From the curb, Marissa watched, her chest tightening. She couldn't shake the feeling that Lena wasn't stepping into a marriage. The hotel suite door clicked shut, muffling the faint echoes of music from the reception hall below. For a moment, silence pressed down on the room, broken only by the mechanical hum of the air conditioner. The suite was luxurious, velvet curtains drawn against the night, a king-sized bed layered with crisp white linens, champagne chilling in a silver bucket. It should have felt like the beginning of a dream. Instead, Lena felt the air grow heavier. Derek dropped onto the bed with a grunt, the mattress sinking deeply under his weight. He loosened his tie, beads of sweat clinging to his temple. "Finally," he muttered, voice low. "No more pretending for everyone else." Lena slipped off her heels, forcing a smile. "You did well tonight." The toast was powerful. He smirked. "They needed to hear it. To know you're mine." His tone carried the same sharp edge as before, but now, with no crowd to mask it, it felt more like a warning than a declaration. She busied herself pouring champagne into 2 flutes. Her hands trembled slightly, and one glass nearly slipped. Derek noticed. "Relax, baby," he said, though his eyes narrowed. "Why are you so jumpy?" "I'm just tired. It's been a long day." He reached for the glass she handed him, gulping it down in one swallow. His gaze roamed over her figure, lingering. "You're beautiful," he said suddenly, his voice softer. "Too beautiful. Sometimes I wonder what you even see in me." Lena sat carefully at the edge of the bed. "I see more than appearances, Derek. I see your heart." But her words didn't ease him. Instead, he chuckled bitterly. "That's what people say when they're settling. Don't lie to me, Lena. I know what others think when they look at me. The whispers, the stares. You heard them too." She stayed quiet. To deny it might anger him, but to admit it would be worse. He leaned forward, taking her hand in his, squeezing, too tightly. "I need to know you're not like them. That you didn't marry me out of pity, or worse, for what I can give you." Her pulse quickened. "I married you because I want this life with you," she said, steadying her voice. "I chose you." For a moment he studied her, eyes searching her face as though weighing her honesty. Then his grip loosened. "Prove it." Lena blinked. "What do you mean?" "Prove you're loyal to me tonight. Promise me you'll never leave, never betray me. Say it so I know." His voice was low but sharp, each word heavy with demand. She hesitated, feeling the walls of the suite closing in. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I promise." But Derek wasn't satisfied. "No. Look me in the eye." Her throat tightened. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I promise I'll never leave you, Derek." His face softened, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He pulled her close, enveloping her in his massive frame. The weight of him pressed against her, suffocating in its intensity. "There," he whispered. "Now I can breathe." Lena's arms circled him, but her eyes remained open, staring into the dim room over his shoulder. The champagne sat untouched on the nightstand, bubbles fizzling into silence. Outside, the city pulsed with life, cars, laughter, music. But inside the suite, Lena felt cut off, a bird locked in a gilded cage. She wondered if her vow had been heard by God, or if it was only Derek's voice that mattered now. The night stretched long, filled with small gestures of affection, overshadowed by Derek's constant need for reassurance. Every touch carried possession, every kiss an unspoken reminder. The sunlight faded into a dusky glow as Lena and Derek returned to their home, a modest 2-story house he had purchased years before. It should have been a haven, but the walls seemed to close in as soon as Lena crossed the threshold. Derek moved slowly, his bulk filling the narrow hallway, breathing heavily with each step. "Home at last," he said, voice thick with satisfaction. He dropped the suit jacket onto a chair, watching her as if expecting applause. Lena smiled faintly. "It's lovely," she said, her tone deliberately light. She wanted peace tonight. The evening began with quiet gestures. Lena unpacking her small suitcase, Derek rummaging through the refrigerator. He insisted she sit, that she was his bride now and shouldn't lift a finger. Yet his attention felt less like care and more like surveillance. His eyes followed her every move. They ate takeout in the living room, the television humming in the background. Derek barely touched his food, more consumed with watching Lena. "You've lived here now with me," he said suddenly. "That means no secrets. No lies. We're one." She set her fork down carefully. "Of course." But Derek leaned forward, his face darkening. "Then tell me about them. The men before me." Her chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb. You've had others. I can see it in your eyes." His voice grew sharp. "Who were they? Did they touch you the way I do? Did you love them?" Lena's hands trembled, but she forced composure. "The past doesn't matter, Derek. You're my husband now." His laugh was bitter. "That's not an answer." He slammed his palm onto the table, making the dishes rattle. "I need to know. Every detail, every mistake you made before me." The room fell silent except for the faint buzz of the television. Lena swallowed hard. "There's nothing to tell. You are the only one that matters." For a moment, Derek simply so. Tired, his jaw tight, his breathing heavy. Then he leaned back, crossing his arms. "Good. Remember that." But the tension didn't fade. Later, in the bedroom, Lena changed into a silk nightgown, her back turned as Derek watched from the bed. His voice broke the quiet. "Did you wear things like that for them too?" She froze. "No, Derek. This is for you." He studied her, searching for cracks in her words. Then, slowly, he patted the bed. "Come here." She obeyed, climbing under the covers. His arm wrapped around her immediately, the weight pinning her down. His whispers returned, a blend of tenderness and threat. "You're mine now. No man before me, no man after. Only me." Lena nodded against his chest, though her eyes remained wide open in the dark. She forced a soft laugh, pressing a kiss against his shoulder, pretending calm. Inside, her fear churned. She realized every question, every suspicion, wasn't about love. It was about control. The night dragged on, Derek's paranoia resurfacing in cycles, questions about her phone, about where she had been before him, about promises she had to repeat again and again. Each time, Lena offered gentle answers, her voice steady, even as her heart pounded. By the time Derek drifted into a heavy sleep, his arm still locked around her, Lena stared at the ceiling. The room felt suffocating, the shadows long and unforgiving. In the silence, she whispered to herself, "It's only the beginning." The words barely left her lips before she closed her eyes, trying to summon strength. But the unease would not fade. She knew tomorrow would bring more questions, more tests, more demands. And as dawn crept closer, she couldn't escape the sinking truth. The cage had already begun to close. The morning after their first night together, Lena moved quietly around the kitchen, brewing coffee, her face pale beneath the soft glow of the overhead light. Derek still slept upstairs, his heavy snores rumbling through the ceiling. She felt drained, as though the weight of his questions had clung to her even in her dreams. A sudden knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, relief washed over her. Marissa stood there, clutching a bag of pastries. "Surprise," she said with a smile, though her eyes immediately searched Lena's face. "I thought I'd check in. You look tired." Lena forced a laugh. "It was a long night, that's all. Come in." They sat at the small kitchen table, Marissa poured coffee, watching her sister closely. "So," she said softly, "how's married life after one whole day?" Lena hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "It's different. Derek just wants to make sure everything is perfect. He cares a lot." "Cares?" Marissa repeated, eyebrows raised. "Or controls?" Before Lena could answer, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Derek entered, his frame filling the doorway, eyes narrowing at the sight of Marissa. "Well," he said flatly, "look who dropped by." Marissa smiled politely. "Just wanted to bring Lena breakfast. Thought she could use some company." "She has company," Derek replied, moving to Lena's side and resting a heavy hand on her shoulder. "She has me." The air thickened. Lena shifted under his touch. "It's fine, Derek. She's my sister." Derek's eyes flicked between them, his jaw tightening. "I don't like people showing up uninvited. This is our home now. Our space." Marissa leaned forward, undeterred. "I'm just making sure she's okay." That word, okay, made Derek's expression darken. He leaned closer, towering over the table. "She's better than okay. She's happier than she's ever been. Aren't you, Lena?" Lena nodded, dead quickly, her voice a whisper. "Yes, I am." But her eyes betrayed her. Marissa saw it, the flicker of fear, the way her sister's shoulders tensed under Derek's grip. Derek smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "See? She doesn't need anyone else interfering. Family can be distracting." Marissa's hands tightened around her cup. "Family's supposed to protect each other. I won't apologize for that." The silence that followed was sharp as glass. Derek's smile faded, and for a moment Lena thought he might explode. But instead, he straightened, releasing her shoulder. "Maybe you should go," he said quietly, his tone colder than before. Marissa rose, placing a gentle hand on Lena's arm. "Call me if you need me. Any time." Her gaze locked with her sister's, a silent message passing between them. After she left, Derek slammed the door shut, the walls rattling. He turned to Lena, his face flushed with anger. "Do you see what she's trying to do? She doesn't respect us. She doesn't respect me. Derek, she's just worried—" "No." His voice cut through hers like a blade. "She's trying to poison you against me. I won't allow it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a growl. "If you love me, Lena, you'll keep them out. No more surprise visits. No more whispers. Just us." Lena's heart raced, her body frozen. She nodded slowly, knowing resistance would only feed his fury. "Just us," she echoed, though the words felt like surrender. Derek's anger eased, a satisfied smile replacing it. He kissed her forehead, heavy and possessive. "That's my wife." But as he walked away, Lena's gaze drifted toward the door where her sister had stood moments before. For the first time, she felt the full weight of her isolation settling in. And deep down, she feared it was only the beginning. That night, Lena lay awake long after Derek had drifted into his thunderous sleep. The house was quiet, but her mind refused to rest. The memory of Marissa's visit replayed over and over. The warning in her sister's eyes, the subtle plea for her to reach out. Lena wanted to, but Derek's words clung like shackles. No more whispers. Just us. She turned on her side, staring into the darkness, and the past rose uninvited. Only a year ago she'd been drowning. Her last relationship had ended violently. A man who promised love but left her with bruises and debt. She had sworn she would never again choose chaos. When Derek appeared, larger than life yet oddly gentle in the beginning, he seemed like safety. He paid for dinners, helped her cover rent, offered stability she hadn't known in years. Stability was what she thought she needed most. And yet, as she lay in his bed now, she felt less free than ever. The glow of her phone on the nightstand tempted her. She reached for it carefully, hoping Derek wouldn't stir. But before she could unlock the screen, his hand shot out in the dark, startling her. "What are you doing?" His voice was groggy but sharp. I was just checking the time," she stammered. He snatched the phone from her hand, squinting at the display. "At midnight?" His eyes scanned the screen, scrolling through her notifications. "Who's this number?" "It's no one, Derek. Probably spam." His nostrils flared. "Don't lie to me." He turned the phone toward her, the light casting harsh shadows on his face. "If you've got nothing to hide, then you won't mind me looking through it." Lena swallowed. Resistance would only escalate things. "Fine, go ahead." For several minutes, the only sound was the rapid tapping of his fingers as he combed through her messages, her call logs, even her social media apps. Finally, he set it down, expression unreadable. "Nothing. Gee, would keep it that way." He rolled onto his back, satisfied, but Lena remained tense, her body stiff beneath the sheets. The next morning, his surveillance continued. Over breakfast, his questions fell like stones. "Who texted you yesterday? Who were you smiling at in the store? Why did you take so long in the bathroom?" Every word was coated in suspicion, and every answer felt like stepping onto thin ice. Later, while Derek showered, Lena escaped to the small desk in the corner, pulling open a drawer. Inside lay a stack of unpaid bills, some with her name still on them. The debts from her past life stared back at her. She had married Derek in part to outrun these ghosts, to find security in his financial strength. But security had become a prison. A memory flickered. The night Derek had slipped an envelope of cash into her purse, after only their third date. "You shouldn't have to struggle," he'd said then, his tone almost tender. She had been desperate, and she had let him rescue her. Now she wondered if that moment had been the first link in a chain she hadn't seen forming. The sound of the shower stopped. She shoved the papers back, closing the drawer just as Derek entered, towel around his waist. His eyes scanned the room as if checking for evidence. "You weren't snooping, were you?" he asked casually, but the weight beneath the words was undeniable. Lena shook her head quickly. "Of course not." He stepped closer, towering over her. "Good, because I told you before. There's no room for secrets here. I need to know every part of you, every move you make. That's what love is." She forced a nod, though her stomach twisted. Love shouldn't have felt like surveillance, like interrogation. But Derek had convinced himself it did, and she was trapped in his version of it. That night, as she lay awake again, Lena whispered into the dark, "What have I done?" The shade. Aldous gave no answer, only the steady sound of Derek's breathing beside her, like the rhythm of a warden pacing outside her cell. And in that silence, she knew. The past she had tried to escape was nothing compared to the cage she had built for herself now. The hours after Derek's accusations over Lena's phone lingered in the air like a poison. She tiptoed around the suite, careful not to invite another storm, but Derek's mood shifted in unpredictable waves. One moment he was quiet, brooding in his armchair, and the next, his voice thundered with demands she couldn't meet. That night, sleep was impossible. Lena lay on her side of the bed, her body stiff and unmoving, pretending to drift off. Derek's breathing was heavy, not with the peaceful rhythm of rest, but with a simmering intensity that kept her nerves raw. At 2 a.m, his voice cut through the silence. "Who was it?" Her stomach twisted. She opened her eyes into the darkness. Who was who? The number. The one that texted you. His bulk shifted, the mattress dipping as he turned toward her. Even in the dark, she could feel his gaze, sharp and unrelenting. Lena swallowed, willing her voice to stay calm. "Derek, I don't know who that was. Probably some spam or a wrong number." "That's what they all say," he hissed, dragging himself upright. "You think I don't notice? You think I can't see when you're lying?" "I'm not lying." Her words came out barely above a whisper, but Derek seized on them, his anger swelling. With a groan, he pushed himself out of bed. His massive frame loomed in the faint light filtering through the curtains, blotting out everything else. The room seemed to shrink around him, and Lena's heart raced. He paced at the foot of the bed, his breaths labored, his fists clenching and unclenching as though holding back a force even he couldn't control. "You think I married you to be played for a fool?" he snapped. "I gave you everything, Lena. And all I ask, all I demand, is loyalty. But you—" His voice cracked. "Louder now." "You're hiding something." Tears stung Lena's eyes. She shook her head quickly, desperate to keep him calm. "I'm not hiding anything. Derek, please, you're scaring me." The words slipped out before she could stop them. His head jerked, his eyes narrowing. For a moment, silence reigned, heavier than any of his shouts. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, the floorboards groaning under his weight. "Good," he muttered. "Maybe you should be scared. Maybe then you'll remember who you belong to." Lena's throat tightened, her instinct screaming at her to run, but where could she go? They were locked in a hotel suite, and Derek kept the keys within reach. Escape for now was impossible. So she forced herself to nod, her voice trembling. "I'm yours. Only yours." He studied her, his breathing ragged, before finally lowering himself back onto the bed. The springs cried out beneath his weight, the sound echoing her own trembling chest. Minutes passed before he spoke again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Don't make me doubt you, Lena. I can't handle doubt. It eats me alive." Lena stared at the ceiling, silent, afraid that even her breath might set him off again. She thought of Marissa, of the life she had before, all the flaws, all the struggles, and wondered if she had traded one prison for another. Beside her, Derek finally closed his eyes, but his hand clamped around her wrist like a shackle, heavy and unyielding. Sleep did not come for her. Instead, she lay in the darkness, her pulse drumming, realization dawning that the marriage she had entered was already suffocating her. Only 24 hours had passed, and yet Lena felt years older, her spirit already bending beneath the weight of Derek's obsession. As dawn began to creep through the curtains, she made a silent vow. She had to find a way to survive this, before survival was no longer an option. The morning sun crept weakly through the curtains, but to Lena it brought no relief. Derek had finally drifted into a deep, rumbling sleep, his hand slack at last from her wrist. She slid carefully from the bed, every motion slow and deliberate, like a prisoner testing the guard's patience. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her mind churned with a single thought. I can't do this. Not for another day. Not for another year. In the quiet of the suite's small sitting area, she clutched her phone like a lifeline. For a long moment, she stared at the screen, her thumb hovering, before she pressed a familiar number. It rang twice. Lena? The voice on the other end was warm, steady, a reminder of the world outside this suffocating marriage. It was Claire, her closest friend, the one who had warned her, gently but persistently, that she might be making a mistake. Lena's lips trembled as she whispered, "Claire, I don't know what I've done." Her voice cracked, tears she had held back all night breaking free. "I think I've made the worst mistake of my life." There was a pause, heavy with concern. "Tell me what's happening. Are you safe?" Lena's eyes darted to the bedroom door, half closed. Derek's snores a low, menacing hum from within. She pressed the phone closer, lowering her voice. He's
He's not what I thought. He doesn't trust me. He watches me. Last night he—" She stopped herself, the memory of his looming figure too raw. "Claire, I feel trapped. I don't think I can stay."
"Then don't," Claire said firmly, though her tone carried both urgency and fear. "Come home. We'll figure it out together. You don't have to stay married to him, Lena. Not if you're this unhappy. Not if you're afraid." The words pierced Lena's heart like a promise of freedom. She closed her eyes, gripping the phone until her knuckles whitened. "I want to leave. I want out. I don't know. How? You'll find a way. We'll make a plan. Just promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." Her whisper barely left her lips, but even that was enough, because somewhere in the silence between words, the bedroom door creaked. Lena's breath caught. She froze, listening. Derek's snores had stopped. A shadow stretched across the thin strip of light between the door and the floor. "Lena?" Claire's voice pressed through the receiver. "Lena, are you there?" She forced herself to answer quickly, keeping her tone light, her heart hammering. "Yes, I'm here. I'll call you later." With shaking hands, she ended the call before Claire could argue. The silence that followed was deafening. Slowly, Lena turned. Derek stood in the doorway, massive and immovable, his eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. "How long have you been up?" she asked, her voice thin, betraying her panic. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed the space between them in slow, deliberate steps, each one sending a chill racing up her spine. Finally, he stopped just a breath away, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, the weight of his suspicion. "Who were you talking to?" His voice was calm, almost too calm, but beneath it seethed something darker. Lena's mind raced. Lies, excuses, explanations tangled together, but none seemed safe. Just Claire," she managed. She wanted to know how the wedding went. Derek's eyes narrowed further, his lips twitching in something between a smile and a sneer. "Is that all?" Her throat was dry. "Yes, that's all." For a long, suffocating moment, he studied her. Then, with a grunt, he turned away, muttering, "You'd better not be keeping things from me, Lena. Because if you are—" His voice trailed off, unfinished, but the threat lingered in the air like smoke. Lena clutched her phone to her chest, her pulse racing. She had confessed the truth to Claire, but now Derek's shadow loomed heavier than ever, and she knew whatever came next would be far more dangerous. The air in the house was thick, unmoving. Since overhearing Lena's hushed conversation, Derek had been a storm contained in a fragile shell. He moved differently now, slow, brooding, as if each step were calculated to remind her of his size, his strength, his control. By late afternoon, Lena made a small attempt to leave, suggesting she needed fresh air, maybe just a short walk to the corner store. Derek's reaction was instant. His hand slammed against the doorframe before she could touch the knob. The walls seemed to close in around her as his massive figure blocked the only exit. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, his voice low but sharp enough to slice through her last thread of calm. Lena's pulse thudded painfully in her ears. "Derek, please, Don't lie to me." He towered closer, his chest heaving. "You think I didn't hear you? Whispering your little secrets to Claire? Planning to run away from me after everything I've given you?" Her hands trembled at her sides. "I wasn't planning to leave. I just needed—" "Needed what?" His voice broke, suddenly softer, almost pleading. "You needed her more than me? I'm your husband, Lena. I gave you my name, my home, my love." His bulk sagged against the door as his eyes brimmed with tears. "Why isn't that enough?" For a fleeting second, pity pierced her fear. She saw not just the monster looming above her, but the broken man beneath, desperate and terrified of being abandoned. But pity couldn't smother the dread. "I'm not trying to hurt you," Lena whispered, her throat tight. But you can't keep me trapped here." Her words struck him like a slap. His expression shifted violently, the tenderness cracking open to reveal fury. "Trapped? You think this is a prison?" His massive fist crashed against the wall, the sound reverberating through the room. Plaster cracked where his knuckles struck. Lena flinched, pressing back against the hallway table. "You don't understand," he continued, his voice raw, shaking with rage. "If you leave me, I have nothing. You'll destroy me." The tears spilled down Lena's cheeks as her breath came in shallow bursts. "Derek, please, I can't live like this." The words seemed to unhinge him completely. In a sudden burst, he grabbed her wrists, pinning them against the wall. His breath came hot and ragged, his weight pressing her into the plaster. She gasped, struggling against the crushing pressure. "Say it," he demanded. "Say you'll never leave me." Her voice cracked. I can't." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Derek's chest rose and fell in heavy, uneven breaths. His grip trembled. Then, just as abruptly, he released her. She stumbled forward, clutching her bruised wrists, her sobs echoing in the small space. Derek collapsed into the armchair, burying his face in his hands. His enormous frame shook with sobs. "I don't want to hurt you," he muttered, rocking slightly. "I just want you to love me." Lena stood frozen, torn between terror and an aching sadness. Her wrists throbbed, her body screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The doors were blocked, the windows locked. She turned away from him, clutching her chest as though holding her heart in place. The house felt like it was shrinking, the walls pressing closer with every beat of her racing pulse. Behind her, Derek's sobs turned back into mutters, words she couldn't quite catch, but knew were dangerous. Something in his tone told her the balance had shifted. He wasn't just hurt anymore. He was unraveling. And Lena understood with bone-deep clarity. She was no longer a wife in a troubled marriage. She was a captive in the home of a man whose love had curdled into obsession. The breaking point had come. The house was silent again, but this time it was the silence of finality. 2 days after their wedding vows, Lena's life ended in the very room she had once tried to call a sanctuary. When the paramedics arrived, summoned by Derek's frantic 911 call, they found him sitting on the edge of the bed, his massive hands trembling over the phone. His voice on the recording had been uneven, high-pitched with panic. "My wife, she's not breathing. She just collapsed. I don't know what happened. Please hurry." But the scene in front of them told a different story. Lena lay sprawled on the bed, her hair matted to her forehead with sweat. Her skin was pale, her lips tinged blue. Around her wrists were faint, fresh bruises, as if someone had gripped her too tightly. A scatter of overturned pillows lay on the floor, and the nightstand lamp was broken, its bulb shattered in a halo of glass. One paramedic glanced at the other, their eyes locking for a moment that said more than words. Still, protocol demanded they try. They placed defibrillator pads, checked for a pulse, began compressions. But it was too late. Within minutes, Lena was pronounced dead. Derek let out a guttural cry that shook the room. He buried his face in his hands, rocking back and forth, his sobs echoing off the walls. "She was fine this morning," he insisted, his voice thick with grief. "She said she was just tired. I told her to rest. Then suddenly she just stopped." The lead paramedic nodded slowly, scribbling notes, but his eyes flickered once more to Lena's wrists, then to the broken lamp. Something didn't align. By the time the police arrived, Derek's story had already begun to twist under pressure. "She had health problems," he explained, his tone desperate. "Stress, anxiety, and I know her family. They'll try to blame me, but I loved her. I loved her more than anything." The officers listened. Our faces neutral, but their gaze swept the room methodically. They noticed the bruising, the scattered bedding, the locked windows, one of them crouched by the lamp, carefully bagging it as evidence. "Mr. Collins," an officer asked quietly, "when exactly did you find her unresponsive?" Derek's massive frame shifted uneasily. I don't know. 10 minutes ago? Maybe 15. I was in the kitchen, and when I came back she was just lying there. But in the corner of the nightstand, her phone was visible, its screen dark. When one officer powered it on, a recent outgoing call glowed on the screen. Claire. The timestamp was only an hour earlier. "Did she speak with anyone today?" the officer pressed. Derek's jaw tightened. "No. She didn't use the phone much." The lie settled uneasily in the air, too brittle to hold. Neighbors soon gathered outside as flashing lights filled the quiet street. Some whispered about the fights they had overheard, the raised voices and slammed doors that had rattled through the walls over the past 2 nights. A woman across the street mentioned she had seen Lena at the window just yesterday, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying. Derek sat in the living room now, a blanket draped across his massive shoulders, his sobs subsiding into short, erratic breaths. He muttered again and again, "I loved her. I loved her," as though repetition might make it true. But to the investigators walking through the home, the story forming in their minds was darker. This didn't look like a sudden collapse. It looked like a struggle, a final one, waged behind closed doors. As Lena's body was carried out under a white sheet, the murmurs among the crowd grew louder, suspicion sharpening into certainty. The fairy tale wedding had become a nightmare in less than 48 hours. And though Derek's tears wet his cheeks, the cracks in his story were already beginning to show. Detective Alvarez stood in the dimly lit living room, her notebook balanced against her palm. The house smelled faintly of stale food and antiseptic, but beneath it lingered something heavier, an air of tension that refused to leave, even after Lena's body had been taken away. Derek slumped on the couch, the blanket slipping from his broad shoulders. His cheeks were streaked with tears, but his eyes darted nervously as the detective asked questions. Every answer seemed rehearsed, as though he had played this scene in his mind before. "She collapsed," he repeated for the 3rd time. "She had health problems, anxiety, stress. You can ask anyone. She wasn't well." But Alvarez had already spoken with the paramedics. She knew about the bruises. She had seen the broken lamp, the disarray of the sheets. His story didn't match the scene. The next morning, the investigation deepened. Lena's sister Marissa arrived at the precinct, her grief edged with anger. She sat stiffly across from Alvarez, clutching a tissue. "I told her not to marry him," Marissa said, her voice shaking. "I knew something was wrong. He was controlling, possessive. Every time I visited, he found a reason to cut the visit short. Lena changed around him. Quiet, guarded, like she was always afraid of saying the wrong thing." Alvarez nodded, taking careful notes. "Did she ever mention feeling unsafe?" Marissa hesitated, then whispered, "Yes. Once, she said she thought she'd made a mistake, but she begged me not to tell anyone. She said Derek wouldn't forgive her if he knew." Later that afternoon, Claire was brought in. Her face was drawn, sleepless, but her voice was clear. "She called me the night before she died. She told me she wanted to leave him. She said she felt trapped." Claire's eyes welled with tears, but her words carried weight. "I told her to come stay with me. That was the last time I heard her voice." The testimonies painted a picture, one not of sudden illness, but of fear, control, and looming violence. Then came the discovery that tightened the net. A forensic team combing through the bedroom uncovered a small recording device tucked beneath the mattress. When played back, the audio was chilling. Derek's voice thundered through the speakers, accusing, demanding, while Lena's softer tones begged him to calm down. The recording cut abruptly, but not before a crash, and Lena's muffled sobs filled the silence. Alongside the device, detectives seized Derek's phone. What they found there was damning. Messages to Lena revealed a pattern of emotional manipulation and threats. "If you ever leave me, you'll regret it. You belong to me now. Don't forget it." There were also browser searches in the weeks leading up to the wedding. How to keep a wife from leaving, signs of betrayal, and disturbingly, what happens if spouse dies suddenly after marriage insurance? That last search unlocked a new motive. Financial records showed Derek had taken out a sizable life insurance policy on Lena just days before the wedding. The beneficiary was, of course, himself. Detective Alvarez closed the folder with a heavy sigh. The pattern was unmistakable. Isolation, control, obsession, and finally, a death wrapped in lies. When Derek was called back in for questioning, his composure cracked under the weight of the evidence. His insistence that Lena had just collapsed faltered when detectives confronted him with the recording. His eyes darted, his hands trembled, sweat pooling on his brow. She pushed me," he stammered. "She made me angry. But I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just wanted her to stay." The words hung in the sterile interrogation room, heavy and irreversible. It wasn't a confession of murder, but it was close enough to open the door for charges. As Alvarez left the room, she knew the case was shifting from tragedy to crime. The man who had once claimed to love Lena more than life itself had built a cage around her, and in the end, that cage had become her coffin. The investigation had uncovered the truth, but justice still had to be decided. The courthouse was packed on the first day of the trial. Reporters filled the benches, their cameras flashing as Derek was led in, shackled, his massive frame hunched beneath the weight of both chains and scrutiny. The story had already captured headlines. Bride dead 48 hours after wedding. The public wanted answers. The courtroom wanted justice. Judge Whitaker presided with calm authority. But the atmosphere was charged, every breath inside the room laced with tension. The prosecution opened first. Assistant District Attorney Keller rose, his voice steady, his words sharp. "This case is not about sudden illness or tragic accident. It is about control. It is about manipulation. It is about a man so consumed by fear of abandonment that he turned his love into a weapon. Lena Collins wasn't simply a wife. She was a prisoner, and 2 days after her vows, she paid the price for his obsession." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Derek shifted in his chair, his eyes darting to the jury. The defense countered with a softer narrative. Attorney Phillips painted Derek as a man broken by his size, his health, and his lifelong struggle with depression. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client is not a monster. He is a man who loved deeply, who feared loss, and who has lived a life marked by ridicule, loneliness, and rejection. What happened in that home was not murder. It was the tragic culmination of stress, illness, and heartbreak. The contrast between arguments set the tone. Over the next days, the courtroom became Lena's stage. Her voice resurrected through those who had loved her. Marissa took the stand first. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she described her last visit. "She wasn't herself," she testified. "She was quiet, almost frightened. When I asked if she was happy, Derek exploded. He told me to leave. That wasn't a husband protecting his wife. That was a man hiding something." Claire followed, her testimony striking the jury with raw emotion. "She called me the night before she died. She told me she wanted to leave him. She said she couldn't breathe in that house. She said she was scared." Claire's voice broke, forcing her to pause, but the silence that filled the room only amplified her words. Then came the evidence. The recordings found beneath the mattress played aloud, Derek's booming voice echoing through the courtroom. "Say you'll never leave me," he had demanded, while Lena's sobs trembled in the background. Jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some lowering their eyes as the recording cut off in a chilling crash. The text messages were displayed next, each one projected for the jury. "You belong to me now. If you walk away, you'll regret it." The words landed with the weight of nails sealing a coffin. The defense tried to soften the blows. Medical experts testified about Derek's failing health, his risk of heart disease, his documented depression. He was unstable, yes, the defense argued, but he wasn't violent by intent. He lashed out because he was desperate, because he feared abandonment, not because he planned to kill. But the prosecution pushed back hard. "Desperation is not an excuse for violence," Keller said, pacing before the jury. "Fear does not justify bruises on a woman's wrists. Loneliness does not explain broken lamps or shattered glass. Derek Collins turned his pain into power, and Lena Collins paid the price." Through it all, Derek sat hunched, sometimes sobbing, sometimes staring blankly at the floor. His defense painted him as pitiful, but the prosecution painted him as dangerous. The trial became more than a question of guilt. It was a battle of perception. Was Derek a man destroyed by his demons, or a predator who cloaked possession as love? As closing arguments neared, the jury carried with them Lena's voice, replayed in every testimony, every message, every recording. She was no longer just a victim in the headlines. She was a woman whose last days revealed a haunting truth. Love can become a prison, and obsession can turn deadly. The courtroom shadows stretched long as the trial neared its end, and all that remained was the verdict. The courtroom was silent when the jury filed back in. Hours of deliberation had passed, yet the weight of anticipation made time feel heavier, slower. Derek sat at the defense table, his massive frame shrunken by chains and exhaustion. His attorney whispered, "Whatever happens, stay calm." But Derek's eyes were fixed on the jurors, searching for mercy where none was likely to be found. "On the charge of second-degree murder," the foreperson read, "we find the defendant, Derek Collins, guilty." The words sliced through the air like a blade. Gasps erupted. Muffled cries came from Lena's family, and Derek's head fell into his hands. The gavel struck, restoring order, but the verdict reverberated like thunder. For Lena's family, the decision was a long-awaited acknowledgement of the truth they had known in their hearts. Marissa clutched her mother's hand, both women trembling as tears spilled freely. Yet even in victory, sorrow clung to them. No sentence could bring Lena back. No courtroom declaration could erase the image of her final hours. During sentencing, the prosecution painted Derek as a man who weaponized love, twisting it into fear. The defense begged for leniency, citing his depression, health issues, and lack of prior violent convictions. Judge Whitaker listened with grave patience, but when he spoke, his words were resolute. "Mr. Collins, this court has heard the voices of those who loved Lena. It has seen the evidence of your control and cruelty. You may call it fear. You may call it desperation. But the truth remains, you chose violence. You took a life bound to you by trust and vows, and you shattered it. This court sentences you to 35 years to life in prison." The sentence landed heavily. Some in the gallery wept in relief, others in quiet rage that he might one day walk free. Derek sat motionless, his face drained of color, his future sealed behind iron bars. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters swarmed. Headlines were written before ink touched paper. Justice for Lena. But the word justice felt fragile, incomplete. For her family, justice meant empty holidays, an unoccupied chair at every gathering, and laughter that would never return. Marissa spoke briefly to the press, her voice breaking. "We're grateful the truth was seen, but nothing about today feels like victory. My sister is still gone. Derek's punishment doesn't erase what he did to her spirit long before he ended her life. She deserved freedom,
happiness and love, not control, not fear. Her words echoed what many inside already knew. Justice in law was not justice in life. Derek's incarceration closed one chapter, but the scars lingered. Claire, Lena's confidant, found herself haunted by late-night phone calls, by the sound of Lena's voice whispering that she couldn't breathe. Lena's mother clung to photographs, her hands tracing her daughter's smile in frames as though touch could keep it alive. Even the jurors, days later, admitted that the case stayed with them. They had delivered the verdict, but they carried the recordings, the bruises, the messages in their minds. Trials end. The weight of truth does not. As weeks turned into months, Derek faded from the headlines. His name became another entry in the long ledger of men who claimed love but practiced possession. Yet Lena's story lingered in conversations, in community forums, in whispered warnings to daughters, sisters, and friends. People spoke her name not just as a victim, but as a reminder of the thin line between devotion and domination. And still, questions lingered in the silence beyond the verdict. Did Lena sense, when she stood at the altar, that her vows would become chains? Did she hope that love could soften obsession, that her patience could tame fear? Did she see danger in Derek's eyes when she said, "I do," or only the reflection of the life she thought she could build? The questions had no answers, only echoes. In the end, Derek's prison walls mirrored the same cage he had once built for Lena, a place where love was confused with control, where desperation strangled freedom. Yet the greater punishment was not his, but hers. A life cut short, a voice silenced. The story of Lena Collins did not end with a gavel. It ended in the unspoken truth that justice is never whole. It is only a shadow of what was lost, a faint attempt to balance scales that can never be even. And so, her memory lingers, haunting, fragile, unyielding, a reminder that love cannot survive where freedom is denied, and that devotion twisted into possession will always end in ruin.